And it was Muslims that used to say the Quran is letter for letter, dot for dot, perfectly preserved. And like, I'll show you something as well, because we're seeing more evidence. This is what Muhammad Hijab said. So he was speaking to the same person, Chris, and he said,
Chris, your first point was the use of preservation means that it's, there's no change in any words.
Right, letter by letter, dot by dot.
That's not true.
By.
For example,
so are you saying that that's not because of it? No, I need clarification. What are you saying?
What I'm saying is that the understanding of preservation, yes, the understanding of hifz or preservation is not that there's no variance.
So there are variants in the Quran?
Absolutely, everyone agrees that.
Everyone agrees there are variants in the Quran?
Yes.
Do you all believe in that?
Yes.
Wow. All right. Thank you.
Bro, I'm getting your dahi, to be honest, to everybody.
He wasn't lying.
he was, and I can bring up some of the stuff. I didn't hear all of it, but I can.
So let me point to him.
Yeah, so that's why I started with the Shia, because the Shia agree on 114 surahs, but they don't agree on the Qira'at.
I don't really care what the Shia agree on. Or not.
No, but I'm saying if he said Shias agree.
Some of the stuff they believe in is like takes you out of Islam.
No, but listen to what he said. I'm saying he said that
I
the
didn't hear him say that.
Okay, that's what I'm saying. Like when he said he lied about some stuff, I'm saying he actually did. So, and I'm saying one of the claims he made was that the Shia agree.
Maybe there are some Shia scholars that agree.
Not well, we would have to produce them, but that's why I provide evidence, because I'm aware that Shias don't agree on the 7 Qira'at. So he didn't say that to the audience. So the audience listening.
Oh, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you said it or not.
No, but I'm saying if you're present in a debate and you say something that's not true.
Well, maybe ask him. He might have some Shia scholars that do agree.
Trust me, like ask any Shia. Maybe you know some Shia people. Like that's what I'm saying. The sites that I got these from, Al-Islam, which is one of the main Shia. Like if you want to learn about Shia Islam, go into alislam.com. And then there's another one which I read from. So I wanted to see what
Let's see this one then.
So
the other one. This one, yeah.
This one is not. This is different because it says the Prophet has said and say. But I want to give stronger ones. So for example, okay. And one of the variants.
Why has he always got a bag?
Oh, and one of the variants, I don't know how much you know about Islam, is that within different sects they wash their feet differently. So, and that's because of a variant in the Quran. So it says, "O you who believe, when you stand up for the prayer, then wash your faces and your hands till the elbows, and wipe your head and your feet." Whereas the other one says, "Wash your feet." So that's why you see some of the differences.
That's something to do with fiqh, though, isn't it?
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying, because it comes from a variant in the Quran.
It's a fiqh. There's nothing that changes the main meaning and message of Islam.
Yeah, but washing your feet. If someone says wiping your feet makes you impure, and the other one says no, you have to wash your feet to make.
They're both right.
But how can they be?
Because that's the whole point of fiqh. Some people it's just on a few minor things. Do I pray like this? Or
yes.
Do I pray like this?
But that's what I'm saying, because
it doesn't take away from the true meaning of God or our beliefs or anything like that.
Yeah, but the whole point is that that's why there's been confusion. For example.
But there's no confusion in the beliefs.
For example, okay, Bismillah. There's disagreement whether
it should be in the Quran or not.
Right. So if the Quran was mutawatir.
What does mutawatir mean? Like perfect?
Like mass recited, then because you had Imam Shafi and Imam Malik, who said it's not part of the Quran. So therefore, if people are saying, well, the Quran has been, ask a Hafiz today what is part of the Quran, they will give you, he said they'll correct like an Imam if the Imam makes a mistake. But then if everyone had memorized the Quran, you wouldn't have two of the big schools of jurisprudence saying that Bismillah is not part of the Quran. Because if everyone had memorized the Quran, how are they saying Bismillah is not part of the Quran? Everyone should have known that.
don't know about that one.
But you've heard about Bismillah not being part of the Quran.
Heard about it,
Right, so that's what I'm saying. So when he's saying the Quran is perfectly preserved, word for word, letter for letter, then why would you have...
But it doesn't really matter though, because it doesn't change the meaning.
Yeah, but the problem is is Bismillah this dua, or is it, if it's not part of the Quran, then why are you reciting it as part of your, you know? So it's either is part of the Quran or it isn't. And if it isn't, then it shows that the Quran wasn't mutawatir and everyone had memorized it, because everyone would say, hey, Bismillah is part of the Quran. So there wouldn't be a disagreement. So that doesn't logically make sense.
Something to address the surah that before you read the surah.
Right.
In the name of God.
But that's what I'm saying. There's been disagreements even till today whether it's part of the Quran or not. But if the Quran has been perfectly preserved and passed on, everyone would agree that Bismillah is either in the Quran or it's not in the Quran.
What about your Bible? Has it been perfectly preserved then?
Christians don't claim that the Bible has been letter for letter, dot for dot, word for word preserved, and it's on an eternal tablet. No, Christians are open that there are variants within the manuscripts and whatnot.
With different meanings.
Sometimes, in some places, like that's why we're open to variants.
But that's kind of weak already from the beginning. Right?
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Christians don't make the same claim as Muslims.
Yeah, but your comment to me saying about someone said wipe your feet and wash your feet.
Right.
But does it change any of our beliefs? No, it doesn't.
Well, of course, it's a difference in how...
It's fiqh, of course it's going to be...
What would you say causes a difference in your belief? What kind of thing?
Some Christians that believe Jesus is Son of God, some other Christians don't believe that Jesus is Son of God. They believe he's a messenger.
Well, it affects the belief in terms of one. For example, I said to you, Shias disagree with the 7 Qira'at. So you might dismiss them, but they dismiss you, and they claim that their traditions go back to Ali. So who's right? Just because Sunnis are in the majority doesn't make them right. So we see a disagreement, because you might say, well, there's a disagreement between Christians on certain things. We can point to this...
Are you Catholic or Protestant?
More Protestant. So that's what I'm saying. So within Islamic traditions, we can see the same thing. And it was Muslims that used to say the Quran is letter for letter, dot for dot, perfectly preserved. And I'll show you something as well, because we're seeing more evidence. This is what Muhammad Hijab said. So he was speaking to the same person, Chris, and he said...
No, excuse me, Chris, your first point was the use of preservation means that it's, there's no change in any words.
Right, letter by letter, dot by dot.
That's not true.
Bar by bar.
For example,
so are you saying that there's not because of it? No, I need clarification. What are you saying?
What I'm saying is that the understanding of preservation, yes, the understanding of hifz or preservation is not that there's no variance.
So there are variants in the Quran.
Absolutely, everyone agrees that.
Everyone agrees there are variants in the Quran.
Yes.
Do you all believe in that?
Yes.
Wow. All right. Thank you.
He's not exactly a scholar, is he?
Well, this is where he spoke to Yasser Qadhi about it, who said there's holes in the standard narrative, and then there was the whole big furore. So I'm just giving you an example of Muhammad Hijab who admits it. And then he said...
I'll tell you something, Chris, which I think you're right about, yeah?
Okay.
When you do listen to, on prima facie value, when you listen to this kind of, when people say that the Quran word for word, letter for letter, it makes it seem as if there's no variance.
Right.
I agree with that. And I think that's a mistake on our behalf.
This is Shabir Ali. He says
many Muslims just simply have this the simplistic idea that there has only been one version of the Quran throughout history, and that's the version that we're holding now. And when we read our history, we see in fact that there were variations, multiple readings that were sanctioned, the multiple readings that are sanctioned in our tradition, and they do not know how to come to grips with that.
And then here's Yasser Qadhi. He says
Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anh, he gets a blank check to be frustrated at these things because he is Ibn Mas'ud. I mean, after you have this credentials that he does, you have every right to say, why should my mushaf be burnt up? I'm not going to give it. To put yourself in his shoes, right? He is not a stranger or a nobody.
So here, in Islamic traditions, Ibn Zayd had 114 surahs, Ubay ibn Ka'b had 116. And this is where there was a great disagreement because Ibn Masud had 111 surahs. So the point was, how come they all had different numbers of surahs? Because your Prophet said to the Muslims that they should learn the Quran from 4 people. One was Ibn Masud, one was Salim, one was Ibn Kayb. So what we see is that there are a lot of problems within Islamic traditions until Uthman standardized it. So what Chris was trying to say is, like, Muslims might say, well, Christians have different numbers of books in their Bible, Protestants or Catholics. But Chris's point was, well, if one day the Pope said, let's stick with 66 books, and all the Christians agreed, that doesn't mean perfect preservation, because we know before there was a disagreement.
It all came from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
No, and this is the problem, because they didn't.
It all came from him though.
That's why, yeah, but the thing is, you can't claim perfect preservation of the Quran, because we know there were certain verses in Ibn Masud's codex, or his Quran, that aren't in the Quran today. And I can give you some examples. So we would have to say, what happened to the perfect preservation? So this whole letter for letter, dot for dot. Because what happened even in Egypt, your country actually, you should know, in 1924, they standardized the Quran. Because what happened at, I think it's maybe Al-Azhar, that when they used to have assignments or whatever in the university, people used to have different answers. So then they ended up using the Hafs Quran and basically throwing everything else in the Nile. So I'm not sure how if you're aware of this history, but you can go and look it up. In the 1924, it was standardized, and then it kind of went to everywhere else, and most of the Muslim world now use the Hafs reading. So the question is, why did the Egyptian government throw all the Qurans in the Nile? If everything was the same, letter for letter, word for word, preserved, it's because it started causing confusion. And that's what one of his points was. I've forgotten what his name is now, the Muslim guy. But he said, well, Muslims today don't disagree. You would go to different places and they all read the same thing. That's because we know things were standardized. In Egypt, it was 1924. So that's why it's like a false, he's making a dishonest point. Because when you look at actually the history. And then what he said was, well, you know, Christians are going to our scholars and saying X, Y, and Z. Yeah, but that's how we're getting information, because this isn't things that people weren't aware of before. Tabari criticized some of the readings that you have now, and he said the grammar is incorrect.
Who's that?
Tabari.
Who's that?
He's like one of your early exegetes. So he's like a very well-known exegete of Islamic traditions and the Quran. So I'll show you who he is. Yeah, so I'll give you 2 incidents from, this is from Al-Sayuti. So it says, the Surat Al-Azab, as read during the Prophet's day, contained 200 verses. But when Uthman wrote the Mus'haf, he could not find more of it than it is now. So if we look at Surah Al-Azab, it won't have 200 verses. So even with your within your Islamic traditions, verses have gone missing. And then we have another one where it says, Zayd ibn Hubaysh says, Ubay ibn Ka'b, one of the Sahaba, asked me, how many verses do you recite in Surah Al-Azab? 73 or 74? I replied, never. He said, it's about the length of Surah Al-Baqarah, or lengthier, and in it is the ayat Al-Rajim. I asked him, Abu Buntir, what is ayat Al-Rajim? He said, it is when an old man and an old woman fornicate, stone the 2 of them, definitely a punishment from God, and Allah is all powerful and wise. So he's saying 73 or 74. So what happened to the 200? That's like almost 130 verses gone missing.
Who's saying that?
So this is from Zayd ibn so this is a hadith.
What's his name?
Ubay ibn Ka'b.
Zayd, is this
Zayd ibn Hubaysh, Hubaysh. So this is the thing, because within Islamic tradition, you had the Battle of Yamama, and where people who had memorized the Quran were getting killed. That was what led to them starting to write down through Abu Bakr, writing a codex of the Quran. Because Muslims will say, yeah, the Quran is recitation, we have Hafiz, but the problem is, if everyone had recited the Quran, why did they write a codex?
Why did they have the scribes?
Yeah, why did Uthman standardize it? Because if everyone had memorized it, you don't need to write.
If you kill all those people, then you could potentially lose the Quran.
Well, exactly. So that goes against the whole thing of everyone has memorized the Quran.
No, but that's why they done it.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. So written tradition is part of the Islamic narrative, whereas people will say, well, everyone has memorized it, so you don't need to write it down. But the reason they wrote it down was to preserve the Quran. So
yeah, but if you're having an attempt to kill those people that are all reciters, then that was the clever thing to do in preserving it.
Well, and that's why I'm saying that goes against the standard Islamic narrative of, well, everyone had memorized it, so we don't need to. Because when we look at the manuscripts, we see a lot of variants. But then the whole thing is, well, they will say, well, the Quran was recited. Well, forget about the manuscripts. But then if you're forgetting about the manuscripts, then why were they writing it down? And as you've said, it was an essential part of Islam to write it down to preserve the text.
Because the Quran is a book from God, isn't it?
Well, yeah, of course, but Muslims will say it's the recitation, and that they'll say, well,
it's a book.
Yeah, but they'll say, well, if you destroy every Quran in the world, you still have Hafiz or Hafiz.
Yeah, so it's going to stay,
right.
It can never perish.
Yeah, but then why did they write it down in the first place?
Because it's a book.
To preserve it. But
and it's a book,
yeah, but no one said we don't need to write it down because everyone's memorized it. They wrote it down to make sure it is preserved.
Yeah, and also because it is a big book from God.
And I'll also just show you some other errors in the Quran, contradictions. So what time do you have to go?
4 o'clock now. Let me see.
Okay, but just before you go, I'll just see if I can find quickly some.
But the thing is, you can't really talk about the preservation of the Quran when you're saying your book is not even preserved.
No, but what I'm saying to you is Christians don't make the same claim as Muslims. We don't claim.
So how can I trust it?
Because that's another conversation we can have. But the problem is, Christians don't claim that a miracle of the Bible is letter for letter, dot for dot preservation of the text.
That means you can't refer to any of your verses and tell me this is what was said.
But what my point is, Muslims claim that the Quran has been preserved letter for letter, dot for dot, haraka for haraka.
It has.
But how can it? Because I've shown you verses where it said there was 200 verses in the Quran. Now there's around 73. That's just one surah.
73 is 114, right?
No, I'm sorry, verses, which is what you were looking at. So how were those 130 verses preserved? They've gone missing. And then obviously...
Who said that, sorry?
That's within your Islamic tradition.
Ibn what?
I would have to look it up again.
Zir ibn Hubaysh.
Yes. And then also, if I can find it. Okay, yeah, here is what I was looking for. Now, if I said to you, buy me a drink, is that the same as saying buy us a drink?
So you're talking, no, but it's different. Everything's about context.
Yeah, but I'm saying, what is the difference between saying buy me a drink and buy us a drink?
Just for you.
Okay, so now in the Hafs, it says, for a limited number of days, so whoever amongst you is ill or on a journey, then equal number of days are to be made up. And upon those who are able to fast, but with hardship, a ransom as a substitute of feeding a poor person each day. Whereas in the Wash Quran, in the Arabic, it says a ransom as a substitute of feeding poor people. And you just agreed a singular is not the same as a plural. So now how can one say feed a poor person? Because if someone has the Wash and someone has the Hafs, they're going to think to make up for their miss as a substitute.
But there's only one standardized one now, though, isn't there?
No, I can show you. For example, I have the Wash. So the Wash Hafs is used in 95% of countries. Like for us, in Morocco, they use the wash. So, and I have the wash, well, the electronic version anyway. So let me see where it is. So even you yourself can see that. So even you yourself can see that there's a difference between a singular and plural. So that's a contradiction.
It's still the same thing though.
How? So if I said to you, buy me a drink, and then you were like, cool, and I said, buy all of us a drink, your pockets aren't going to have enough to, you're going to be like, nah, that's too many people.
I can buy everyone a drink.
Yeah. Dom Perignon shirt. So let me get it again.
Bro, let me tell you what, yeah.
Because you wanted to have a look at it. Because that is clearly not the same. It contradicts each other. Because a plural is not the same as a singular.
Ta'amun miskin, ta'amun masakin. Feeding poor people each day. Poor person each day.
So clearly that's going to cause a difference. Because someone might say, yeah, okay, feeding a poor person, but poor people, when it's a plural.
Well, both are fine though.
Yeah, but the point
between buying someone a drink,
right,
and feeding a poor person. So if you feed a poor person,
yeah,
you feed a poor group of people,
right,
it's the same thing.
So which one do you do though?
Huh?
Which one? Because if Allah says
that's fiqh though. It hasn't. It's not like it's not saying feed a poor person. Do not feed a poor person. If you came to me with that,
yeah, okay, you even have those in the Quran as well. But
the dispersed one, he said.
No, that's not even it. So I'll give you
Let's step away from the camera.
Oh, it'll still pick us up. So if you stand here, it won't pick you up. Okay. So now I've given you two examples, and clearly within the singular and the plural. That's why I asked you before I showed it to you. You said it's a contradiction.
I'm not a linguist though. That's
no, but common sense tells you. That's why I asked you.
You said you don't need common sense in religion.
No,
that's the whole basis on the belief of the Trinity.
No, I'm saying, in terms of saying me and us, you agreed that what the meaning is different. Because I said, would that be a contradiction? And you said yes. Then when I showed you the verse in the Quran, then you're like, well, it's the same thing.
Yeah, I'm saying that either one is fine.
Yeah, but when I asked you before, you said it was a contradiction. But when I pointed out the Quran.
But you're talking about something different though. You're talking about different.
Yeah, so what you're saying is when it comes to the Quran, it's not a contradiction.
No, it's all about context.
Yeah, the context for you is the Quran. When it's not in the Quran, it's not a contradiction. But when it's in the Quran, then the context is, it must make sense. And I'll even show you something else. I've got two passages to show you. Okay, yeah, right. Here's another contradiction. Hafs and Wash. So it says, and Pharaoh said, let me kill Moses and let him call upon his Lord. Indeed, I fear that he will change your religion or that he will cause corruption in the land. And this one says, let me kill Moses and let him call upon his Lord. Indeed, I fear that he will change your religion and that he will cause corruption in the land. Now, the problem with this one is Allah is quoting Pharaoh. So Pharaoh didn't say two things at the same time. He either said, or that religion will cause corruption, or he said, and that religion.
But the thing is...
Because remember, this is a quote. So this means a quotation is what someone said word for word. So which word did Pharaoh actually say when he said this sentence? Because it's a quote. And he's not saying, well, Pharaoh said something about, he's saying this is what he actually said. So if you're quoting someone, it's word for word what they said. And he couldn't have said the same thing at the same time.
I don't know, I need to look into it.
Okay, and then I'll give you one final one before you go. So.
But bro, who calls himself Paperboy though?
So,
How can you be expected to be taken seriously?
because I delivered the good news. But
You call yourself Paperboy.
so here it is. Look. So, this is Al-Isra, and it says, he said, you have most surely known that none sent these down except the Lord of the heavens. So where it's red, I can see what it says in different qira'at. In Al-Kasai, it says, he said, I have most surely known. But here it says, you have surely known. So if I say you are from Egypt, that's not the same as saying I am from Egypt. That can't be the same thing. So
when he went to them.
So look, when I click on the red, it says the alternate reading in a different Quran, he said, I have most surely known. Where it says, you must surely known. Now that's a contradiction. Who knows? Me, I, or you? Because your Quran says, if this wasn't from God, you'd have surely found many errors and contradictions. And I've shown you a simple contradiction. I and you is not the same thing.
But you can't show me in English too. It has to be in Arabic. So it has to be explained of the meaning of the word.
Yeah,
you can't just tell me direct translation English.
So I'm saying, when you get home, even download this, because this is...
I bet you some Christian made it.
No, Bridges' translation of the 10 Qira'at of the Holy Quran. A Christian's not going to call this Holy Quran.
I know, but I told you, you can't just tell me the English translation. You need to go root all the way back to the origins of the word.
Right. But
same thing as the crucifixion.
Okay, so my question would be this. If it does say, if I can show you the Arabic where it says you and I, would you say that was a contradiction?
But it won't though, I know for a fact.
Okay, well, I'm just saying.
I know for a fact there's a meaning and there's an explanation.
No, but I'm saying if someone's quoted saying you and I, is that a contradiction though?
It depends about the context, to be honest.
Because
it's just like the royal we, you know, the royal we.
No, there is no royal you and I. Because you and I is not royal we. There is no royal I or no royal we or you.
To be honest, I don't know.
Yeah. So this is what I'm saying.
All I know is that Islam is the truth.
So this is what I'm saying. I can show you evidences and upon evidences. Yeah. So we can have another conversation about it. And I would say just look at the Bridges translation as well. You can research it yourself. So even though you can verify it by Muslim scholars who have created the app, these are experts in language, so they can translate it accurately into the English. All you have to do is just check out their credentials. They're academics. I think maybe it might be America or so. But yeah, so on that note,
You got food for us?
for me, not us,
Huh?
because you said
But did he bring us food?
now you're saying us, because when I said about feeding people versus feeding a poor person, you said it was the same thing.
But the thing is, you can't challenge the Quran if your own beliefs you don't even believe it was preserved.
No, but the Bible is not going to help the Quran. So even if the Bible was corrupt and there's errors, it doesn't help Islam. So that's why I'm saying, look at your own faith, the claims that are made. I'm not saying...
What about the claims of your religion?
Well, we can have a discussion about that.
Is Jesus God? Do you worship God alone?
Yeah, we can have a discussion about that.
Total confusion.
But the point is, that doesn't help Islam, because we're asking about these errors in the Quran. So regardless of what Christianity says, it has no bearing on what the Quran says.
But why are you trying to prove the Quran wrong though? For what reason?
Because I'm saying twofolds. One is that Muslims make a claim.
We don't try to prove your religion wrong. You
Of
try
course.
to prove our religion wrong.
Go to Hashim, go to Mansour, go to any of the Islamic channels week in, week out on YouTube. That's what they do. So now and the whole thing is, it's Muslims that say the Bible is corrupt. So it's Muslims that bring the attack on Christianity. So you've just now proven your point. Because you said, why do Christians attack Islam? You've just said, our religion is corrupt.
The Quran's never been corrupt.
Well, I've shown you some contradictions. I've shown you missing verses and whatnot. So you can either just say, well, ignore it, Or you can actually use your intellect and say, there's so many errors in the transmission of the Quran, verses have gone missing.
But I don't need to use my intellect because you guys don't believe in intellect.
No, but no one's made that claim.
You have made that claim.
No.
We can't comprehend God. He does what he wants.
So I've said we cannot comprehend the nature of God. We can comprehend if someone makes a claim that a book's perfectly preserved, letter for letter, dot for dot, and we look at another version and it's different, we can use our intellect then. I'm saying no one has seen the essence of God in his glory. So therefore, a lot of things we make, sometimes people use philosophical ideas to equate what God might be like, but until any of us see God, we don't know what God's actually like. But God's given you something to verify, because even in your Quran, it says, if it were from any other than Allah, no, it actually says, do they not ponder upon the Quran? If it was from any other, they would find in it many errors and contradictions. So the Quran is challenging us to look through it and find errors and contradictions. Then when we do find those errors and contradictions, Muslims say, well, yeah, bila kaif.
There are no contradictions.
I've just shown you one where it says you and I.
So that we have to go back to the...
Right, but again, this can be verified, but what you're doing is kind of cognitive dissonance in saying, well, it must go back to... The fact of the matter is it's like me saying...
I know for sure 100% it can be explained.
Well, it can't be.
It can.
For example, like the Bismillah. What's the answer for that?
It can be explained.
So
it
why...
doesn't change the meaning of the message.
But why would two of your imams of fiqh disagree on whether it's part of the Quran or not?
It doesn't change the meaning or the message of Islam.
So what is the message of Islam? The perfect preservation of the Quran. That's one of them. So if that goes out the window, then Muslims can't claim that the perfect preservation.
Go back to exactly what is the definition of the preservation.
But this is the whole thing, and that's why when I showed you Muhammad Hijab and Dr. Shabir Ali, who agreed there's variance. So they said
meaning and message.
They've said
there are variants,
but this is the thing. They have now had to concede that there are variants, and the message doesn't change. But then that is the claim Christians make. So therefore, that the Quran, because Christians say there are variants, and we've always admitted this, and we say there's nothing that fundamentally changes the core beliefs of our faith. And that's now the claim Muslims are making, because we have shown that there are variants and differences within the...
Well, we know that there are variants.
No, but that's what I'm saying. When I said to you, the letter for letter, dot for dot, haraka for haraka, preservation of the Quran, you've heard that yourself. Because that's what they used to come to the park and say.
Every single one, yes.
Right.
They were all revealed to the Prophet.
But that's what I'm saying. I've shown you differences in work. So it can't be haraka for haraka.
That's an English translation, though.
But I've shown you the Arabic as well. Bushra and Nushra. It's not the same word. It's a variant.
Do you speak Arabic?
I know Bushra and Nushra is not the same word. I don't need to.
Same meaning, though.
Yeah, but it's a different word.
Doesn't matter. People in Scotland, Wales use different words, but the same meaning.
But the meanings, I gave you glad tidings and to disperse. That's not the same meaning.
The thing is, when you translate something, it's your best effort to translate
the
word.
So are you saying to me, Bushra and Nushra, to disperse and to bring glad tidings has the same meaning?
It depends on the context. Brother, I need to go because I got football.
Cool. All right, well, we'll speak again.
Yeah.
Pleasant conversation. And we'll speak again and go over some of the information in detail. Yeah. Score a hat trick. So so basically that discussion was on the differences in the Qira'at, and clearly what we see, and that's why I asked him, if something says this, is it a contradiction? Yeah, you and I is a contradiction, or feeding a person is different from feeding people. But when it's in the Quran, now it's the context. There must be some sort of reasoning. And this is what I'm saying. So the Islamic narrative has gone out the window. And this is why people like Muhammad Hijab and Shabir Ali no longer claim letter for letter, dot for dot, haraka for haraka, preservation of the Quran. They admit there are variants. So therefore, if there are variants, they now are saying the same thing that Christians say. We admit there are variants within our textual tradition, but nothing within them fundamentally affects our faith. So this is why we see, like within the Islamic community, people still hold on to this idea of letter for letter, dot for dot preservation of the Quran. We see people like Ibn Masud had 111 surahs. We see people like Ibn Kayb had 116. We see missing verses throughout. So how were those missing verses preserved? So clearly, if we use our intellect, we know that this myth of the perfect preservation has holes in it. So on that note, peace out.